right, so it is 6 o'clock, so I'm going to call this meeting to order. If you could start the recording, please. Thank you.
That's you.
Recording in progress.
Calling this meeting to order at 6 o'clock. Can I get someone to accept the agenda, please?
I move to accept it.
I second.
All those in favor of approving the agenda, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Any abstentions? Perfect. Thank you. Communications with parents, citizens, and staff. Is anybody here to speak to the board? Okay. All right, then we will move on. So I'm going to turn it over to Renee so that you can introduce him, our guest tonight, and go from there.
All right. So as we were talking earlier in the school year about certainly the budget, but then also about buildings and student enrollment in different grade levels around the supervisory union, I felt like it was really good for us to come from a point of view of research and data, as opposed to just kind of having what we have been able to use for just like maybe 1 year at a time. And so Dr. Grip is a Vermont, I'll let him tell you about himself, but he is a demographer who has done demographics around the state of Vermont as well as the Northeast. So we reached out to him, and he was available to do a demographic study of our 8 towns. And I will turn it over to him to begin the study.
Thanks, Ray. Good evening, everybody. As soon as it comes up, I'll start. So basically, the demographic study that we did was probably done in October, so a month ago. Presentation tonight, probably about 20 minutes, and if you could just hold your questions to the end, I'd appreciate that, because I might run into some things that I might actually talk about in one of your questions. Thanks so much. I'll have your way. That's fine. Okay, just a little bit about our company. It's called Statistical Forecasting. It's actually based in Summit, Vermont, in Dorset. That's where I'm from, so just an hour to the south. We've been doing this kind of work for the last 26 years, since 1998. Most of the districts that we work with, school districts, are in the New York, New Jersey metropolitan area. As you can imagine, in Vermont, we don't have the same kinds of issues that they have in the more metro areas with a lot of new housing starts, for instance. So that's where most of our activity is. We do all the enrollment projections for the New York City public schools, which is just a beast, given that there's almost over 1 million students down there. As you've probably been watching the news, there's a migrant crisis going on, with a lot of people getting bussed in and having to educate children. So a little bit about myself. I'm the executive director. I have a doctorate in educational statistics and measurement from Rutgers University, New Jersey. Basically, most of us that wind up doing this kind of work, actually this kind of degree, wind up working for the College Board and doing something called psychometrics, which is we look at the testing and reliability of the SAT or other exams, but that's not what I want to do. So I was a school teacher in New Jersey at the time. I taught physics and statistics, and my superintendent, he knew I didn't know what the heck to do my dissertation about, he said, why don't you look at this thing called school demography? That's this niche field, and here we are 26 years later. So I still present on this particular topic around the country, and I testify as an expert witness in court hearings when school districts want to divorce from each other in particular states. So the purpose of this study, everyone thinks that a demographic study is really just about projecting enrollments, but it's way more than that. So tonight, what you're going to see is, of course, the enrollment projections, but what gets us there to those numbers. So we look at only a 5-year period from the 25-26 year through 29-30. You may ask, well, why don't we go to 10 years or 15 years? And the biggest problem we have with that is then you have to start predicting kids who haven't been born yet. And we do that for New York City, but it's a very challenging thing to do when we have small communities like we have here in Vermont. Other things I looked at was the community population trends of all 8 towns that feed into the supervisory union. Other demographic characteristics such as race and economics that you're going to hear about in a moment. Age structure, which is really important because if you have an older community, you're going to have a situation where you might not have that many births and therefore not many kids. So we'll talk about that. I lost it.
Sorry,
All right.
screen sharing wasn't working.
Oh, okay. Other things we'll look at is the historical enrollments in the last 10 years, both district-wide, which I refer to as the supervisory union, and by grade configuration, elementary, middle, and high, and also by school. We looked at the new housing starts in each one of the towns and how that could impact enrollments, and looked at building capacities of all the buildings in the supervisory union, and how that compares to enrollment to see if you have shortages of seating or surpluses in seating.
It was in Zoom.
Are you in?
Oh, technical glitches are so fun. Sorry, sir.
That's all right. I think I know what the next slide was. I'd probably know this by memory if I could do it.
There we go.
All right,
Awesome.
so the next thing you're looking at right here is a graph of all the populations of the 8 towns that feed into the supervisory union. This is kind of interesting because everything to the right of this vertical line right here is your projected populations, and to the left is from the census from 1940 all the way up to 2020. And you can see that we had this, if you just look in the aggregate of all the towns combined, a growing population, but in 2020, the total population, all 8 towns together, is about 11,489. And when we compare that from 2010, just 10 years prior, it was just a loss of 28 people. So really, the population here has been static in the last decade. The state of Vermont is actually projecting a decline in the overall population of the supervisory union area, but I wouldn't put too much stake on that because that's based on data from 2010 that they're using to project, not 2020. So I think those numbers will get revised eventually. Brandon and Pittsburgh have the largest populations of the sending towns. I'm sure you're aware of that. So now we're going to look at some of the demographic characteristics. Who are you as the communities aggregated together? So whites are the largest race in each town. You can see around 90% or more. Whiting has the lowest median age, while Goshen and Sudbury have the highest. And you can see where Vermont lies, just as a point of comparison. 4 of the towns have a median age above 50. That's very high. When I work with people, with other school districts, most median ages are somewhere around 40. So you got 4 towns that are above 50. Where I live in Dorset, I think the median age is about 55, and Manchester, sister town right nearby, roughly around the same. So we have the same problem.
Not sharing properly with Zoom.
Give me 1 second to get it up and running.
One of the things that you'll see next is that you have what's called a foreign-born percentage, which are the people who are born from other communities. Very, very low in these communities, you might expect. If I remember correctly, I think Whiting has the greatest percentage of foreign-born people, around 11%. And I want to say Pittsburgh was 0, but that's just out of my memory. We'll see.
Correct.
Yeah? Okay.
Working on it, sorry.
He's on the next slide.
Go to the next slide?
Yep,
Okay.
that one.
This one?
Yep, that one right there.
Okay. Yeah, it's me.
You want to stay there, and I'll just leave it. In case there's any other problems. Okay, you can go to the next one.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, right there. So one of the things we like to look at is the educational attainment of the communities. How many people went to college, got a bachelor's degree or higher? So we look at the range, the lows and the highs. The low is that in Whiting, 23%, Mendon the highest at 48%, but you can see the states around 44%. Looking at income, Chittenden the highest, 102K, Leicester the lowest at 53K, and Vermont sort of in the middle at 81. Four of the 8 towns are above the state median household income. Regarding the value of an owner-occupied unit, you can see there, Sudbury has and Mendon have the highest values, while Pittsburgh has the lowest, and Vermont's around $332,000 for a median value of a home. And for renters, we'd like to look at that. Brandon has the highest percentage of renters, about 29% of the population. Goshen the lowest, but they're all lower than the state average, which is around 30%. Next, please. Okay, so this one here, I guess it's going to like scroll up and down. So here's just a map that we created of all of the member towns and all the schools located in the various towns. Okay, next. All right, so now let's talk about you as a supervisory union. So the enrollment we're going to talk about first is where you are today, and that today would be as in October 1st, roughly, when the enrollment counts were finalized. So the enrollments you're going to see here do not include pre-K. And I'll talk about just the K-12 population, filter out the pre-K students. So as of 24-25, the K-12 population was 1234. And we look at that over the 10-year period, really you had stable enrollment through 22-23 school year, and then there was declines in the last 2 years. You can see the declines there of 72 and 37 students respectively. When we look back to the 15-16 years, which would be 10 years prior, that's a decline of 136 students over that period, where enrollment was 1370. Now, how do we project enrollment? That's probably like the #1 question I get. There's 2 different methodologies we use. One is something called the cohort survival ratio method, which is used when the grade level sizes are usually above 35 or 40 students. And as you know, some of your schools, we're projecting that at the school level, have very small grade levels, so that doesn't really work. So we have something called the grade progression differences method we use to project enrollments for really small grade cohorts. Next, please. So this is just showing you a slide of the enrollment over time. The one I would focus on is the blue, because that's the K-12. Orange is the PK-12. But you can kind of see what I was talking about, fairly stable and then declining in the last couple of years. Next, please. All right, so what I wanted to do, and I talked to Renee about this, is I like to look at enrollment in clusters as an elementary, middle, and high. And I know that you don't all have the same schools at the same grade spans. You do have one school that's K-8, and most of the others are K-6. But I like to break it down in elementary, K-6, 7-8 being middle, and 9-12 being high, just so you can see what's going on. So the elementary one is the blue one up and top. And what we really saw was that enrollment declined through the 2020 school year before it reversed trend. So this is the difference. If you look at the difference between the 24-25 year and the 15-16 year, it's a loss of 84 students. And I always tell people, this is the one slide you look at and don't fall asleep on. Because if the elementary population is declining over time, guess what has to happen to middle and high over the next 10 years? They also have to go down because those smaller cohorts have to move through the system. The other ones that you're seeing up here are for the middle and the high school. Really not much of a change in the middle school enrollment, only 7 students different. That's the bottom line in the last 10 years. At the high school level, about a difference of 45 children less. That's the purple line right here in the middle. Next, please. So one thing, and I had a meeting with the administrative team, we talked about, Chittenden and Mendon have high school choice. So you can't see it basically from while you're seeing, but most of the number of children per year that are going to other schools from Chittenden and Mendon are roughly around 100. So what we did is we tabulated where are they going for the last 6 years. And in blue is the greatest number of the schools they're going to, which is Rutland. They're going to Rutland High School. About 60% of the students from Chittenden and Mendon are going to Rutland High School every year, of that 100. The red is Otter Valley Union High School, and it ranges between 3 to 7 per year of that 100, very, very small. And there's a list of all these other schools, including where I'm from, which is Burton. So someone's coming this long distance all the way down to Manchester, which is incredible to me. Excuse me, next please. Okay, so really briefly, just so we don't glaze over with this whole process, how do we project enrollment? So here's an example that if we have 100 first graders in the 23-24 year, and the next year there's 95 second graders, the progression rate, or we call it a survival rate, is 95 over 100, or 0.95. And we do that for all the grade progressions, including birth to kindergarten. So there's really 13 grade progressions. If the ratios are above 1, that means you have inward migration, students moving into the district. Below 1, like in that fictitious example, outward migration. So when I looked at all 13 of your ratios from the last 5 years, taking an average, 7 of the 13 were below 1. So what does that tell me? Well, you really don't have a clear migration trend. Some districts I work with have, say, 11 of 13 below 1. So now I know that in the net you have outward migration, but you don't have that going on here. You have a mix of in and out. But what you do have, for the ones that were below 1, are at the high school level. So what is that telling me? You're losing students here. Either they're moving out once they're already in, or dropping out. There's a whole bunch of different things that can happen, or they're going to some of those other places. Maybe they're just paying tuition somewhere. But that's interesting here, that the 4 ratios of those 7 that were below 1 were at the high school level. So what we do is we take these average ratios from the last 5 years, each of the grade progressions, we apply it to your most current enrollment and assume that those ratios are going to hold constant through the whole 5-year period. And if that's going to get you your projections. Excuse me, next please. All right, so every district has a phenomenon called kindergarten replacement. And what it is simply, in this particular case, you have positive kindergarten replacement, and it's occurred in 8 of the last 9 years, ranging from 3 to 42 students per year. Positive is when you have a greater number of kindergarten students entering the district than what graduated the prior year as seniors. So let me just give you an example. If you had 100 seniors graduating in the last year, and you have 150 kindergarten students coming in this year, you've gained 50 students right out of the gate. Now, why are you gaining students? I can tell you why. You probably know it too. It's the answer's right below. It's because the students who start here from Chittenden to Mendon as kindergarten students don't finish as seniors because they're going somewhere else. And that's why there's that difference. Next. All right, so that's just the kindergarten replacement over time. It's ranging from, say, 3 to 42 students. Next, please. So BERTs are really important to us because that's your kindergarten kids 5 years later. So we got this information from the Vermont Department of Health by town. It's not based on zip code anymore like it used to be back in the day, and there was always some confusion whether or not the child was actually from that particular town. But we've gotten our data science better, so we know they're accurate. But Brandon obviously makes sense. Biggest town, has had the most number of BERTs annually over this time period, 31 to 55, followed by Pittsburgh. But when we look at the birth counts in a more recent period, the birth counts in the aggregate have actually declined. An average of 85 in the last 5 years compared to the prior 8, where it's around 101. So when we go to the next slide, you'll see what I'm talking about. So this is just the aggregate of all the towns stacked, but you can see right over here how it's much lower than the years prior. And that's gonna tell you that, yeah, you're gonna have fewer kindergarten students coming in as a result. Next, please. So what I did was a chart here showing you from 2010 to 2022, which is the most recent year we had birth data from the state. Here's the aggregate of all the births in the supervisory union. Here's how many kindergarten kids come 5 years later. And then the survival ratio was the number of kindergarten students divided by births. We'll get there.
We'll get there.
But what I want you to focus when it does come back is that last column. Remember we talked about when the values are above 1 for these ratios, it means inward migration, and if they're below 1, it's outward migration. So you got an interesting mix here that, you know, that, say, let's look at the top of the screen, you have 90 births and 107 came 5 years later. That's obviously inward migration. So some students moved in to those communities from other towns and enrolled in kindergarten in the supervisory union, one of the schools. Okay, it's not showing it by school, it's showing it by the whole supervisory union. Next. So this is called an age-sex pyramid, and it's going to help you understand what's going on here. This is from 2010, and this is for all the town's population aggregated. Males are on the left, females are on the right, and these are age classes, 0 to 4, 5 to 9, 10 to 14, all the way up to 85 and up. So back in 2010, the largest group for males was 50 to 54, and for females, over here is 45 to 49. If we advance to the next slide for 2020, watch what happens. You see how it rose up the screen? Because if people don't move, well, we all get older, right? This is what happens. So the largest group in 2020 for males and females was 60 to 64. So you really got this older community here. These people aren't having kids. All right, and so it's really hard to get more births in the community unless we get this area in the 30s to kind of grow. It's not a problem unique to you. This is a problem all over Vermont. I've been reading about it for a long time, and it's certainly, it's just going to be a problem for a while until we can attract some younger families in. Next, please. So when we look at the change in the male and female population over that 10-year period, all I'm doing here is showing you the biggest decliners in red and the biggest gainers in blue. The biggest gainers were the 65 to 69 for males and 70 to 74 for females. The biggest decliners were the people in their 45 to 49 for males and females. But if we were to actually add males and females together, I can tell you this, that there were big gains in every age group from 55 to 84. So that's definitely an aging population.
Apparently it affects incoming kindergartners ratios.
We're not asking questions now, are we?
Just,
No.
sorry, I missed that. Can we ask that at the end?
Just, yeah, questions at the end.
So this down here, if we add the school age population, there were fairly large declines in the 0 to 4 age group, the 10 to 14 age group, which is your middle school, and 15 to 19, which is your high school and college age groups. Next, please. So I contacted the planning and zoning department of each town, which is kind of fun in Vermont because, you know, a lot of towns are farming towns, and there's all kind of Act 250 preservation of land, so there's nothing going on. Brandon had the most new housing units approved, 27 at the Brandon Training School. There's potentially more, another 19 workforce housing units, but they're not included in the table that's in the report because it hasn't been approved yet, and they don't know what the bedroom distribution is going to be like. The other towns really don't have much. Brandon was the biggest. And based upon some what we call multipliers, or how many children we can expect out of a house, that's how many children we would expect K to 12. 11 in elementary, 4 in middle, 6 in high, for a total of 21. But that's school age children. Public school children, it could be a little less than 21. based upon that maybe 95% or so, maybe here, problems of yes, go to public school. Next, please. This chart just shows you a list of all the housing developments that are in each of the community. It's just Brandon, Lester's got one of like, I think it's 9 single-family homes. And then Mendon has one of 5 single-family. So there's really not much going on. Next, please. So the enrollment projections, which is really what you've all been waiting for. When we project out for a 5-year period, we're projecting the K-12 population to slowly decline for the next 5 years. So in the 29-30 year, we're talking 1,177 students. When you compare that to the 1,234 of today, you're talking a loss of 57 students. So that's not tremendous, but there is somewhat of a decline. Next, please. This is the telling statistic. Where is the decline? So this is just a table of the current enrollments at the elementary, middle, and high, and then the projected counts per year. And at the end, what's the 5-year change? And you can see at the elementary population, there's a decline of 92 students projected. So that's the biggest decline. It's not equal across the different grade levels, but it's in the elementary. And small gains or almost static enrollment at the middle school level, but a small gain at the high school. Next. So I asked the district to provide me, the supervisory union to provide me a capacity values of your school buildings. So the values that you see up here for capacities of each one of the buildings, and it's a range, because that's the way they gave us the values. It's not an exact number, but say 200 to 250 students. So we compared that to the current enrollment in 24-25 and the projected enrollment in 29-30, took the difference. If the value is positive, we put it in blue, and the value is negative, we put it in red. Blue would mean that you have surplus seating, and red would be that you have a shortage of seating. Building's probably tight, nobody's sitting outside in the parking lot, any of that kind of stuff. But if I pronounce this right, is it Neshobe would be the one school that is over capacity currently, but due to declining enrollment would pretty much just be a capacity at the end of the 5-year period. The other buildings have pretty much surplus seating according to the way the building's capacity and they're currently being used in the school districts. Yes, next please. So summary for tonight. Enrollments are projected to decline the next 5 years, but really only in the elementary grades. Decline is really primarily due to the declining birth rate I showed you, and subsequently smaller entering kindergarten students 5 years later. Middle and high school enrollments really not projected to have too much change in their enrollment in the next 5 years. So with that, I'll open it up to the board for questions. Yes.
So the capacity question, and I don't know if you're the one to answer that, but what is it based on? Because that seems like a high capacity ratio, like 170 students at Leicester seems like a lot.
So that's I would presume that data came out of Brenda and Rich's office, and it'd be based on the classrooms and the square footage.
Yeah, I'm remember having issues when I was a principal that capacity came out of the sewage, like how much it could handle, and not so much about the space, the area. And so it was always a little bit higher expectation than what the actual room was. And so I was just wondering what went into consideration for that. Because then those numbers would change a little.
Yes, and Renee, you spoke to that. I don't have the exact methodology about how it's calculated, but I can tell you how it's calculated in some other states that I work with. So for instance, if an architect comes into your building and looks at a general ed classroom and says, based on board policy, we're only going to educate 20 students in this classroom, you just count up those classrooms, multiply it by 20, and that's for the gen ed. But then special ed, or gifted and talented, they're in small group instruction rooms. They can't have a maximum of 20. They might be 8. So, that's another factor. And if you start switching, say, gen ed to special ed classrooms or vice versa, you can change the capacity really quickly. But that's just my methodology from other places. I can't say it translates to here. but I would think it's probably close. It's not a fire code capacity by any stretch of the imagination.
You mentioned that Whiting's both the youngest town and got the highest percentage of immigrants. Is it younger because of the immigrants?
So here's the issue with some of that. The data that we get from the census is incredibly, incredibly small sample size. I wouldn't even really go down, dig too deep and look at that, but that was my guess, is that you might have some farm workers that are doing, that from other countries. But just to give you an example, the data that I showed you for that demographic slide is based on a 5% sample, 1% over a 5-year period, like 18, 19, 20, 21, 22 years. So the confidence interval, which is like a band that it can be up here as high or as low as here, or so wide that I don't really trust so much on the census data. I'm just giving you more overtures, but nothing really specific. And I wish I could give you more, but I can't.
I've got a follow-up then that's broader. Are you accounting for immigration in the study at all?
That's a great question. Explicitly, no. Implicitly, yes. So in other words, if there's been a lot of immigration going on in any of the communities in the last 10 years, those cohort survival ratios would capture it. We can see that there's inward migration, but we don't know the reasons why. Is it because there's people moving in for work? Are they coming in because the housing stock here is cheaper than a few towns over? What's the reason that people are moving? We don't know. And as far as immigration policies with the new presidential team coming in, changing, that also could have an impact up here as well. But when we do our analysis, we're doing a projection and not a forecast. And a lot of people think they're the same thing, but they're not. A projection is actually taking past trends and extrapolating in the future. A forecast is actually making some assumptions. The economy is going to get better. Interest rates are going to go down. Immigration is going to tighten up or not, or go the other way. So they're very different. So we don't really make any assumptions going forward. We're really taking backward information going 5 years out.
Thanks.
Hope that helps. Other questions? Hopefully I put you to sleep. I love this stuff. So.
I've got another one. At the very beginning, you said the projection for 2030 you thought would be different than the number you showed. Why and how would it be different, do you expect?
Did I say that? I'm sure I remember what I said. What the projection would be different than what?
Yeah, I think it was the first or second chart. I was conscious of not interrupting because I did with the question.
Go to the front.
Yeah, it's the historical and projected populations 1940 to 2030.
Oh, yeah. That's going to be,
Historical, right there.
Right there, yeah. Yeah, I think.
Oh, that was in the middle of
this. So this value here at the very end is based upon data from 2010. So the Vermont, I forget which division actually creates these population projections, but this is based upon this data here in 2010. So now that they have 2020, they're going to rerun all the numbers. And I'm not really sure what they're going to come up with in terms of your projection for the 2030 year. But, you know, it could be higher than what it is based upon the fact that you've been really stable in the last 10 years. You haven't changed. So I would think that number would come up a little bit. I mean, I think what's the big takeaway tonight, I would say, is this is, again, it's the age structure of the supervisory union, the people that make up your towns. I mean, when you see the median ages are as high as they are, and you saw that one graph when the age structures or the population pyramids, we call them, kind of shifted upwards.
Yeah.
And now you got like all the people in the 60s as your age group. That's really the issue. And, you know, you don't have people bearing children as much, so it's going to be an issue going forward.
And
Every school.
And with no new housing and not a lot of rental units to begin with, it's probably going to just keep rising up that.
Tight
Access.
housing and expensive housing.
Mhm.
It's the expense, I don't know, I mean, where we are, a little south of you, it's crazy.
Yes, here.
It is crazy here too. I don't know how anybody does it. I'm starting to wonder.
That's why you have a younger generation that can't afford to live here.
Or or I got kids in their 20s, at least they're not in my basement, but they might be coming back soon. I don't know. But that's seriously, they just don't, they cannot afford rents that are, I've got a daughter in DC who's paying like $2,700 a month. And that's just bananas.
But what's she making an hour? A lot more than she making around here.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
That's
But
the
it's
thing,
only-
my kids live out in the Midwest too, they make twice as much what they make here.
But they could probably have cheaper housing.
That's right,
Yeah.
cheaper housing, they make twice as much, so why would they come back?
Yeah. It's sad because I love this state. And I moved up here 25 years ago and I've already got my burial plot picked out, so.
We're getting taxed out of the state.
Not yet.
You'll be taxed out of your, you'll be taxed out of your plot pretty soon, they would put a tax on that.
I don't know.
So even though you only go out 5 years because that's the information that we have, and based on the, what you've showed us, we're looking at a decline of 57 students by 2030 if everything stays stagnant the way it is. And so we can probably pretty much rest assured that even going 5 years out without any information, that we're going to continue to lose students because our population is older.
I mean, so we're assuming those migration patterns that have happened in the last 5 years are gonna continue?
Yep.
So all things in a controlled environment?
Right,
Yes,
okay.
yes.
Well, I think that's something that we, need to hear, so, because if we're just looking 5 years and we're like, oh, 57 students, no big deal, and I see the increase in the middle school and the high school, well, then those numbers are gonna decrease as those elementary students come in as well.
If we come back 10 years from now,
Yeah,
something like that, it would take a while, though. It does take a
Okay.
while.
okay.
I
Thank
mean,
you.
of course, now, the other option is if Chittenden and Mendon, more students, that's a big wild card, right? If more students from those towns decided that they wanted to come here for school choice, wow, that could be a game changer. And so that's a classic case where, to your point, sir, we're using projections based upon that Chittenden and Mendon students, they're gonna stay in that same type of pattern of going to Rutland mostly, or some other community towns, but, not coming back. And if we did that as an option, that'd be more like a forecast of changing that model.
Yeah, you just hit upon a very live issue in this district that needs to become live again. I'll put this in form of a question for you. Did you account for class at all in
That account for what?
class, economic class?
That just, we talked about earlier with some of the income data, but no, I mean, we're not look at students specifically.
Yeah, when I see
If they're
students
free
at
to use
Long
college,
Trail
sure.
and Burton almost equaling students at OV, it makes me wonder. But leave that aside for now.
Yeah, I forgot what the BBA counts for. They were,
It's 2 for BBA and 4 for Long Trail, 3 for OV.
yeah, that's another school down by Long Trail, yeah. I can't see doing that every day for an hour and 10 minutes.
There's a bus in there. Used to
Yeah,
be
is there a bus?
There is not a bus. We do not provide busing.
No, we don't, but I think
They
that there
do
is a
for
bus
Rutland,
that goes towards Long.
Oh, maybe. Maybe Long Trail has a bus, but,
Yeah, there's
No.
a lot from Killington Mountain School. You probably have the slide handy. It might be about 10 per year.
I think it is.
But no, Rutland's by far 60 a year roughly, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah, Killington's 10 this year.
Yeah.
What about the kids that go to technical school, high school?
The tech gets down in Rutland.
Tech kids from home pay that go to Rutland and stuff. Or Middlebury, yes, or Hanover.
If they're a shared time student, I don't know how that's calculated in enrollment counts.
So if they're our student, we just have to pay tuition to where they go to school.
so they're included in our count.
That was my question. Are they?
Yes, they're included in our count.
Okay, there's-
So you get the tax dollars from the state for them.
And-
Then how much of that money goes to Rutland for Stafford?
Whatever the tuition rate is.
Yeah.
It's usually higher
than
than
Which-
the tuition here, right?
Yeah, I can't remember
It is
what the tuition rate is.
$1,000 or so, I think.
How much?
It's like $1,000 more into.
Yeah, that's just very rough.
Oh, Brenda might know.
Yeah,
She's
Brenda,
online.
can you answer that question?
Yeah, she's up there.
I can't off the top of my head, but it is much higher than 1,000. For students that go to Hannaford, it's a half-a-day program, and we pay close to, I think, 18 to 21,000 for them for the half a day. Plus, they're in our school for the half a day. And for students who go to Stafford, we pay 18,000.
So it sounds like we get it, but then we send it out.
And
More.
and more.
Yeah.
And more.
And more. We get to count the kid, but we don't get, we don't get any funding. We get it and we send it out. Fly.
Plus transportation.
Yep.
Anybody else?
Any idea on the margin of error?
That's a really good question. So what we shoot for as in the field is 1% per year. So at the end of the 5-year period, a 5% error range either way would be good, which would be about 60 students either way, roughly.
Which is our 57.
That's not good. But
I
usually.
had a second career as a political pollster here.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of margin of errors in that, right? But no, usually we're within that number of 1% a year. I mean, the pandemic was a disaster because we didn't expect a lot of the things. So that would have been an outlier, but other than that, usually we're on.
Is there a way to run, like, I know that when we're looking at socioeconomic data, we run the pre-reduced lunch numbers. Is there a way to, put that in the system to run, or incorporate that into the analysis somehow?
Are you asking whether we could project or look at historical numbers for free and reduced and project going forward? I mean, you can. I have done that for some school districts, but I'm just going to guess right here. I don't know what your free and reduced percentages are, but
It's about 40, between 40 and 50.
okay. But when you start slicing that up at the smaller K to 6, there's small levels to begin with, and then our accuracy of projecting enrollments is really, really poor. Those numbers, yeah. So if we did it for maybe the middle and high school here, it might be fine, but I wouldn't do it at the elementary level. Too hard.
What would it show anyways?
Yeah. What would it, how would it
You were
apply?
asking about whether they looked at socioeconomics, and I was wondering if there's a way to get that view.
We got some of them averaged income, value of the real estate.
I mean, it was clear to me that there are certain communities that, are wealthier, and I'm assuming it would be the same way with the free and reduced population. And I'm thinking Barstow would be the first one off the top of my head, and then others it might not be, so,
I'm just wondering if affordability, that affects the affordability of staying versus leaving.
There's a lot of reasons. High taxes, property taxes, as you know, this year we got clobbered, and it's unsustainable. But we'll see what happens in the next couple of years. I doubt that's going to continue.
Can we go back to the slide where the 57 shows? It's just, because one of the issues, right, is that it's never in a clump, which makes it really hard to make decisions, because if it's a few here and a few here and a few in each grade, it makes it.
It was 92 in the elementary reduction,
It makes
and
it
an
more.
increase in the middle school of 11, and an increase in the high school of 24, which results in a
57?
negative
Enrollment
57.
projections.
So it's
Enrollment.
92 in the
Yeah.
elementary.
Yeah.
But
that
it's not
should-
in a one grade, it's
No,
gradual.
no, it's over.
So that's the tough part, right?
If you
Because
look at the
it's no
report, it will
meat
have the
and
grade
tail.
level counts projected if you want to
Yeah.
go. It's not showing here. but
Okay.
If you get the Word doc or
Okay.
PDF I sent.
This one
Yeah,
should be attached.
okay, got it.
Yeah, you should have that.
Yeah,
I'm just giving you the overview.
yeah. But I think that's what makes decisions sometimes difficult, because it's not enough to consolidate two grades or,
Well, we thank you very much for your time and effort in this.
Thank you.
We've got a lot to think about,
Yes.
so.
Well, pleasure meeting you all.
Thank you.
for the opportunity
Thank you.
to speak.
Thank you.
Was it fun to work on a small district instead of New York City?
What's that?
Was it fun to work on a small district as opposed to New
You
York
know
City?
what? In fact, only my commute was an hour tonight rather than 4 or 5 hours, and then another 4 hours in traffic. Plus, my wife's hiding in Rutland right now, so I'm gonna go pick her up.
Oh, there, all right. Nice, thank you.
Thank you so much. And Renee, thank you for this.
You're welcome.
Good evening, everybody.
Thank
All right,
you.
good night, thank you. All right, so moving on tonight, we are going to talk about the continued middle school model. And so you should have, I know, right? There we go. So last meeting, we talked about having a consultant here. And a consultant makes sense, but one thing that we can do by ourselves without a consultant is really brainstorm what the middle school model might look here and what we could do at Otter Valley to make it more attractive, more usable, more whatever word you want to use there. And so I was hoping that we could come up with a list of what we would like to see here at Otter Valley. And so one of the things I had talked to briefly with Renee and Brenda as we were leaving, I think, the last meeting, was, and I think this was Renee's idea, was bringing central office here to Otter Valley and thinking about divesting those two buildings over at.
North Campus.
Thank you. That's what, yeah. Or
And training school.
Training school, whatever you want to call it. Because it kind of does two things. It brings us together, and it also allows us not to have to maintain two additional buildings. So that's one thing I'd like to put on our brainstorm list. But those are the kinds of the things that I think we as a group need to think about brainstorming. The other thing that I briefly talked about with Renee was thinking about a committee that would look specifically at this, kind of like our task force committee, but looks mainly at the middle school. And for those of you who were here in 2016 and 17, which was none of you, except for me, when we had committees, I just want to point that out. Oh, that's right, you were here, but you were not a board member. You just got to write about it, what we were doing.
Oh, I was here during committees.
I attended a committee meeting.
Okay, all right, well, there you go.
I was here for
So,
the end of the committee.
if you remember what we did with committees, other than the task force, and I think we did a little bit with the task force too, is that we would have these committees. We had a finance committee, we had a curriculum committee, and we had a policy committee. I think those were the three we had. So those committees would meet outside of the normal meeting, would come back, and then our whole board would rip apart whatever they had come up with, and we would rewrite
The
the.
maintenance, was there a maintenance committee or the buildings and?
I think that was part of the finance committee.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, so, anyway, so so we would rip it all apart and reinvent the wheel. So I am going to leave it up to you to think about, but these are just things I want you to keep in the back of your mind as to whether you want this to be done in a committee type setting where we could have some lay people from the community on it as well. Have just some board members who could look at all of the different ways we could do things and then bring it back for the board for consideration. So, but as a big group, I still would like to kind of have this brainstorm session where we take however long it takes to come up with some ideas of what should be here at Otter Valley. And if that includes a central office, that's great. If it includes another gym, that's great. You know, if we want to bring 6th graders in, that's great. What else do we need here?
So how does the, including central office, help with the middle school issue?
Doesn't necessarily, but I think it's something that if we're going to expand Otter Valley for middle school,
Okay.
then this is the time to think about all the expansions that we would want at Otter Valley and do it all at one time. That's the only reason that was brought up. Because otherwise we're doing things piecemeal and that doesn't make any sense, and that's why a consultant might be good to help us. I mean, we could always bring Allison Popa back, who was our consultant during the task force, who was really, really helpful as our consultant to help us with the task force data that we looked at. and came up with the middle school model in the first place, and then got blown up during COVID. So, all the information I
Sometimes
have.
it's too much history.
I know, right? Sorry, too much history. Anyway, but
No such
anyways,
thing.
I know, I was just thinking that.
yeah, so that is what I wanted to put out there, and open it up to you guys.
Are you paying rent for your offices?
No, we own those buildings.
So what would you do with the building?
I don't know. I mean, that would be something, I mean,
Make it into senior centers.
we could sell the central office building. We could give the North Campus to the rec department, because they're constantly looking for a building. And we could do lots of things. But
Daycare?
there could
Daycare?
be a daycare there, sure, but maybe not us running.
Well, yeah.
And departments
know.
run them, so that sounds lucrative.
Sell it.
Right, well, right, so, there's the, and then that could be turned into senior housing or low-income housing or whatever is needed in
Seems
town.
like there's already a housing development happening there, or is that the houses that are?
There is a discussion, at the old, campus center, that yes, they are looking to turn that into housing.
There's a
So this could be
proposal.
something that could be integrated into
Sure,
that.
yep. Yep.
How many employees are at the North Campus?
At North Campus or at
Or
Central Office?
Central Office? Like, how many people would we have to pull over?
In the
Make
building
Space for?
regularly, I'd say probably like 15? 15 at central office?
Yeah. Yeah, that's probably about right. Maybe a few less than that.
Then a couple of additional meeting spaces that the school would be able to use too.
And we have actually emptied out central office a little bit this year because the guidance counselors that were there in the basement and all of the coaches that had offices there have been moved into the schools this year. So they have offices in each of the schools so that they can actually work with students instead of be removed from those students. So we're not using it at full capacity anymore.
Brenda chimed in that it's about 20-ish.
Okay.
And I asked her if we still had to cut the grass, because we're part of the group that has to make sure that lawn looks really nice as you drive into Brandon.
How many students at your campus?
I can respond to that if that's okay.
Sure.
Sure.
Okay, I'm Brian Crane. I'm the Director of Student Support Services, and right now we have 3 students placed there, a special educator. I have a psychologist who does the small school teams, but he helps out there as he's a clinical psychologist, and then I have para support. So right now we have 3 students placed there, but we are looking at if it would remain to continue to grow it as an alternative site, but depending on what the board would want to do.
Are those middle school or high school students? Or are they're
Yeah.
not elementary, are they?
They are elementary, yep.
They're
So the 2 of them are 6th graders. So we would have to we'll begin that transition planning about about their placement for their 7th grade year, and that would be ongoing based on their needs.
Okay.
So you don't have high school students up at our campus anymore?
No, our Foothills program, which is where kids who need to find their credits, actually work at the high school in the new trailer that we have out back.
So Lori, to get back to the broader discussion.
Sure.
I think moving central office is a great idea, not just for financial reasons, but so Renee can have lunch with kids. I mean, it's a good thing to have the administrators with students. I know that Mill River does it and Fairhaven does it.
Fairhaven does it, yeah.
Slate Valley, I guess I should say. So, and then as far as a committee goes, to think about the middle school model, I think it's a good idea because, as Brent has pointed out a couple of times now, we spin our wheels in a group this big, and it's harder to get anywhere.
Okay. What's everybody else's thoughts?
I agree with Kevin. I would also say if we have a committee that maybe we appoint people who are experts in certain fields instead of opening it up. I mean, we can open it up to the public, but,
We usually,
you know,
It's usually by invitation, isn't
it,
like
I
I,
don't know how we did that before. I think
Or
it was-
application.
like Tanner would be great to be on the committee, or somebody who has experience with,
I think we did invite people from
Well, we invited, Mark Rayshart was on there, and, yep, Jay Merluzzi. So, you know, I think it was community members who didn't have kids in school too, so that, you know, we kind of pulled from all demographics. That's kind of what we tried to do. So we had a parent, we had, just a community member. Who else do we have? I can't think of who else was on that. Mostly board members, I think.
You had some, because I know that, you had some teachers who knew for things that, because Andy was on one of them.
Okay. I don't remember that. I don't remember having a teacher there, but that's okay.
Maybe not teacher, but I remember Andy was on one of the.
Okay, right, I think Andy, we had the curriculum director there, yeah. But,
Not for facilities, but for the, yeah.
I
So
just
this-
don't want to create another committee that's just going to spin their wheels because they
well,
don't
this
have
would, this
the
would have to have a
expertise. Yeah.
specific deadline, you know, I mean, like 6 months or something like that.
Right, but I
to-
also want them to know what they're talking, have some experience in what we're talking about.
Yeah, at least bring in architects and
Yeah.
construction engineers or something. So-
Because that's partly why we spin our wheels, is we don't know.
Well, and we don't even know if we're doing an addition or a whole new building, right? We haven't figured that out yet.
Oh, I know, I think we figured that out. And the reason for that is because a new building, if we were to do a new building, it would not be close enough to this building to make it, work for everybody. And if we built a new building, it would have to be out on the old football field, which means that we can't use the same people easily. Whereas we could use the same people easily in building that's all connected. So that we've had pretty much figured out back in 2020.
And then we decided how much of this we could use, because that's going to determine whether we have another gym, whether we have 10 classrooms or 2 classrooms.
Well, I think that's what part of this whole discussion is about, is how much of that are we gonna take and how much, what do we need here?
Well,
You
no,
know,
if you're bringing another whole nother grade, I mean, they fight for gym time now.
right, so I think we
That's
know we need
definite.
another.
There's no question about that.
Okay, so that's one of the, so a gym, that would be added to the, list of things we want here.
So the committee would explore also, like, for example, if the 6th grade were to move into the middle school, then that will make those demographics even more severe, right? So that projection of the elementary school numbers would be,
It still ends up being 57 regardless of whether they're here or they're in the elementary school.
no, but
Right, it creates more space
it
in the
creates more
elementary
space
schools.
in the elementary schools, which may create less need for buildings. That's where I'm going.
Well, and the other part,
Yes.
sorry. The other part of that is if,
Well, I guess I'm, creates a need for less buildings? or-
For less buildings.
Okay, okay, thank you.
and this has been
It's using the
discussion
buildings
too,
differently.
but Pittsford is way under their number of students. Yet, we have, I don't know what the percentage is that comes from Pittsford to Neshabie. But a lot of those kids could stay right in Pittsford, and that would even a lot of things up.
I don't know how many students we have.
We have quite a few of mine, from what I've heard or understand, come from Pittsford to Neshabie for one reason or another, whether they got 2 brothers, 2 sisters, or whatever the case may be.
I don't know how accurate that is, actually.
That's what I thought I'd heard everybody say. There was a lot
Yeah,
of-
I mean, we
from
could
Pittsford.
find out. I mean, that's one of the things you can look at is the demographics of who's coming from what schools, but I'm not sure that that's actually
That might help
accurate.
equal some of it up, as far as space. They seem to have some, we don't have enough, so.
How far back are we going with this? Is the committee focus going to be the middle school model? Or is the committee's focus going to be what our long-term plan is?
I think that it includes the middle school model and what's the long-term plan, because if we're gonna build, we're only building once.
Sure, but I mean, there's a spectrum all the way from we're gonna build a school for every kid, right? K through 12.
Yeah, and I think we would find that that would be irresponsible, but.
Or, you know, is it 6, 7, 8? Is it 5, 6, 7, 8, right? I mean, I'm just, that's why I'm asking, because I don't know.
And again, that could be committee, that can be a committee discussion, that could be the charge. I mean, you have to we as a board have to determine what the charge is that we're giving that committee.
Because there comes a tipping point, right?
Sure.
Where if we subtract enough from the elementary schools, we have to have a conversation about dropping to 2.
Yeah. Or 1.
Or 1, depending how far we go, right?
Yeah.
Or 0. Right?
Well, that's, sure. Yep.
I'm just trying to wrap my head around what the plan would be if we move 7th and 8th grade into their own, another brand-new wing. What happens with all those classrooms and everything they're currently residing in? I mean, are we gonna have just empty rooms and?
Well, actually, there's something to be said for that. Just because you're adding on, that doesn't mean 7th and 8th graders and 6th graders are going over there. It could very well mean that the high school is going over there and the 6th, 7th, and 8th stay over here. I mean, there is that. I mean, we could talk about,
I just know we seem to tend to keep them separated, the senior high.
sure.
and junior.
Well, and that could still happen. The middle school could be on this side, high school could be on that side, but the nice thing is that the cafeteria is here, so they could both use the cafeteria. And we might want to think about upgrading our cafeteria because it hasn't been upgraded since 1960. What year is this school?
61.
There you go, 1961.
The 2 cafeterias.
Oh, well, I'm talking about the actual
Kitchen.
kitchen
Oh, okay,
part.
yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, the kitchen.
And then, as an added piece of security, you could put central office in the middle too,
Yeah.
as another layer of separation.
Sure.
Right, I mean, it's just, I think it would mean looking at the whole space, not just at the addition.
Right.
It would be like, how do we rearrange?
There's no point in my mind anyway, there's no point in building unless we're talking about upgrades to things like labs and the shop and the cafeteria. It's not just a matter of classroom capacity, it's all those things.
Right. I mean, this is gonna take a while. This is not gonna be done like next year. I mean, hopefully the state can wrap their head around what they're gonna do with property taxes and with building,
Today's paper.
right, I know. But anyway, I mean, so we're probably looking at, if we were to do anything, it would be within 3 years' time. And we would need community support. They would have to know what we're doing and why we're doing it.
And we have to look at it both in what we're building, but what we're saving elsewhere, right? Like there has to be a savings somewhere.
Sure,
in order
absolutely.
to make that happen.
Well, it has to make sense, whether economically, educationally, all of that stuff. It's not just to build.
How
Or
is it benefiting the kids?
Right, exactly. That's
And their
exactly right.
education.
And maybe also think of, is there something that we can put in here that will eliminate some of that tuition that goes to Stafford and keep it in here?
He's smiling.
Well, I
I
know.
was thinking of 56 other kids, not Stafford ones, but.
Build it and they will come.
Well, and that's the other thing. I mean, part of the reason is we have an aging population. Our kids aren't staying, right? How are we gonna get our kids to stay here?
Right.
That's higher than us, that's government. That's state government. We gotta lower things so it's affordable.
Yeah, well,
to live here.
my son's not looking at schools around here, He doesn't want to stay here. And not because of he's not even thinking about that,
He
right?
will.
Well, sure.
Mine didn't.
But
when
they
he
don't want to
left,
live
and he
here.
ain't coming back because of it.
There's something to
Well, they
keep
wouldn't-
them entertained here.
Yeah,
Well, they want to
So-
see something different.
yeah.
Not rolling hills right now.
Lots of reasons.
There's lots of reasons to leave. Sometimes you just have to go see what's out there, and then you come back.
Yeah, my daughter went and came back.
Right.
She's here.
Yeah.
My
So.
son went and didn't come back. So it's all.
Everyone is unique. So if we were to do a committee, you're not gonna want more than 10 people on that committee. Well, that's how many we had on the task force, because you wanna have a good group of board members on it so that they can come back and say, yes, this is what.
Like, that's
And
too
then-
much.
Well,
And-
I'm just telling you, if you're looking at 6 people, that's too small. I
And
think
it's gonna be too much work.
it's gonna be too much work.
So,
We already have, what are we now, 12?
I know. 14 if you include them.
So you're taking 2 people off. You
Oh,
know.
no. You're taking more than that because you're asking community members to come in.
Oh, no, it's a portion.
Yeah.
I hear you, but they're still, how do we know they're not gonna spin their wheels like we are?
Yeah.
That's all I'm thinking is,
Because you're putting in people who have other expertise.
Well, and you have a facilitator, which I'm thinking your facilitator, if she's still available, Allison Popo was really, really good about that with our task force. And I don't think you start bringing architects and things like that into the whole piece until you know what you're looking for.
you
I
can't
mean, like
know
a
what you're
real-
looking for unless you have the
I
foundational
mean, if you want
information.
Tanner Romano on here, that's fine, but I'm talking about like having an architect firm.
Oh, yeah, no,
part,
no,
you
no.
know.
Making design.
No,
Yeah.
I'm
We need
saying,
somebody that can
Okay.
draw something
No,
up.
no, no.
yeah,
Sketch
somebody
something
who
out,
That would be
understands.
great.
Blueprint it, and sketch it.
Should we put this on the ballot in March to see if the community wants us to explore this? Or should we just do?
It doesn't require a vote.
Doesn't require a vote, and the only reason I'm saying that we should move on this is because before COVID, everybody wanted, well, I won't say everybody, but if you look at the task force data, this middle school model was one of the biggest things that came out of it. And that's what people were looking for. They were looking for that 6th, 7th, and 8th grade to be cohesive and together. But I think we need to expand it to really look at what can this building do for us that would help save us some money? And pulling central office in and removing North Campus from our building structure makes a lot of sense. And in that time frame, who knows what else might happen?
I might be reading into Brett's point, but I'll just say that the way I interpreted the election locally and in the state is as a form of tax revolt. And if we appear to be presenting a Taj Mahal plan to the public for what we've just been told is a flat to possibly declining school population, it's going to be an extremely difficult sell. We have to be upfront about this thing and not surprise anybody from the get-go. And by that I mean now. We have to make the case that your children need this. We're trying to do this as economically as possible. There's all sorts of things to consider, blah, 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 but that has to be upfront, and we have to be prepared to hear from the start, I can't afford this is crazy, what are you thinking? Because unless we have that conversation, we're gonna waste our time on these committees and on this board. Unless there's, a wild swing in political, the political
But that's
So
what
right
I
now, we
meant,
have
I think
nothing to
we
vote
have
for.
to show.
Well,
Numbers or anything.
right, well, and I would like to make this
But
point.
just the idea that we're thinking about it, I think is.
Well, wait a minute. Can I just say
Yeah,
one
sure.
thing? Okay. So last meeting, we approved the VCC going for, or that we were willing to put out to the community if the community wanted the VCC to get our property, right? As a taxpayer and as a board member, I'll admit, as a board member, I'm biased. Do I want a valley-wide community center that costs $13 million? Or would I like to see the school building expand and maybe add on things that would allow the community in to use a gym area or to use the same way the VCC would, but maybe not have a membership fee attached? And allow for the use of the basketball court to be used as a pickleball court, or have some, yoga meeting or something. I don't know. But from my standpoint, that's what I would rather see. And use the money that way.
As a school, can we do that? Can we open it up to the public again?
Why not? I don't see
Didn't
why
know how it
not.
worked. I'm just curious.
Yeah, I know. I mean,
You're gonna face the same problem we do, which is they have to get a bond passed.
right.
So, we can read the tea leaves however we want about where people are feeling with their pocketbooks right now, but I think it does feel like a little bit of a bad time to be bringing this up.
If we
That's
don't
why I-
start planning now, then when the time is good, we won't be ready.
We're not asking anybody to spend any money right now.
No,
And
we're
if we
not.
were to spend money, it would have to go to a vote, and in 2 or 3 years, right? We're not even talking about money right now. We're just talking about research. Is this something that we can even do? Is it even fiscally responsible? Is it possible?
And it's not necessarily Taj Mahal either. Yes, you're going to look at the Taj Mahal all the way down to the basic bones, and then you're going to decide what makes the most sense,
But why
right?
is the line drawn at, we want to do our research, instead of starting with, does the community even want this? Is this something that they would even consider supporting? Why would we not start there?
Because
I
they
think we've already
supported
done
it.
that.
They've already supported it in the past. It got, stalled because of COVID, and now we're coming back to it.
Yeah,
I don't feel like this is a new thing. This is a continuation.
The issue is still here.
there was a, community survey, I mean, yes, it's a while ago, but it was the number one thing people wanted to see was some form of middle school model. And we would be spinning our wheels if we went back and spent the money and the time doing it all over again. I mean, it's not that much longer.
That support might be very, especially after the last year's tax increases and stuff. If we continue to keep going up at that pace, we'll never get a middle school.
No, but if we're creative, right, and we think about how do we integrate the community, and instead of passing a multi-million-dollar bond to build a separate building, instead integrating this as more of a community building that is used for multiple purposes, educating our kids and more, then I think we are addressing the needs of an aging community that needs space and use of facilities, and we're gaining what is rightfully what our kids need. I mean, the issues that are presented to the middle school model right now are real, and they're not going to go away by just saying we're not going to do anything. We have to do something to address what the needs are, and at the same time, I feel it's an opportunity to show the community that we are looking at how do we build on what we have and are able to perhaps save money in other places. It's not like we're just saying, we'll add this and leave everything else as is. We're looking at the whole picture. And I think at that point, to me, that's a responsible fiscal way of addressing multiple needs at once.
I think the issue is calling it middle school model.
Yeah,
That's not how I'm
exactly.
seeing this.
No, we
This
can
is not
call
a
it
middle
something.
school model. This is a how can we consolidate and make better use of our space, right? We know that Neshabie is bursting at the seams. We see that it's still going to be bursting at the seams. So we do have to do something about the space in that building. So what can we do to reconfigure what we have or add on and lose some expenses in other places? That's how I'm seeing it, not as a middle school model. It's just, we need to really rethink our space in a holistic way.
As a member of the community, I agree with that, and I'm a former teacher also, but definitely.
Yeah.
So can I add, I would really, so it's important for us to look ahead. And we need to look through the eyes of the students. We know that we have an obligation to the community out there, but we need to look through the eyes of the students and the needs of the students. And so we know that there are facilities that need to be added on, because when this building was originally built in
1961.
1961, we probably had sufficient room for science expectations and for tech expectations and even for athletic expectations. And so that needs to be brought to the forefront, seeing it through the eyes of a student. In addition to that, I know that this kind of goes to Kevin's point too, is that if there is some beautification and really bringing this into an idea of this is our community, we need to think about that demographic tree that Dr. Grip showed, that if we have something that is beautiful for the students and it's beautiful and useful for the community, and they have the opportunity to be a part of it too, it's now something that they own, and hopefully they will be able to support it. And so if And that's the piece that I think we need to make sure that if we are going to move forward, we have to think that this is a building that belongs to the community. But first and foremost, it belongs to the kids.
I just want to say, in case anybody from the Herald or the reporters on the line, I'm already regretting the use of the term Taj Mahal. What I was trying to do was imagine.
You could use Coruscant.
Imagine an argument from a person hostile to the project, but that's not how I think of it.
Brett?
I guess, because Andrew, why do you think most of Mendon kids go to Rutland? I mean, do you think it's just because it's closer, or because it's a newer school with a whole lot more amenities and, facilities and things to offer? So this, what we're talking about, maybe it'll attract some more students to come
Right,
here instead of going to
so,
Rutland. Something as well.
I will tell you that at one point Barstow put forth an idea to their community that instead of having free school choice, that they would have choice among like 3 schools, and their community blew up at them. So choice is very, very important to those 2 towns for whatever reason. But yes, most of them end up in Rutland, and we don't know if that also means that they're at Stafford, and
Yeah, no, I'm just saying,
But yeah.
the school's fairly new,
Right.
compared to this.
Yes, sure.
And they have a lot more amenities. They've got the football field, they got the track, they've got all these other things that we don't, I mean, football field, but things that they don't offer with the track field, whatever. But
Yeah.
I just wonder if that isn't some of it, because it's a newer facility and more things to offer.
Yeah,
Good point.
it's a good point. Right.
So I feel like we have 2 problems. And I think at its face value, the middle school model makes a lot of sense. The problem is that the only building we have that is, and I question OCA a little bit, right? Whether or not it's actually big enough for the space, right? But according to the document that we just saw tonight in the presentation, the only school that's overflowing is Neshby. So if we look at the district as a whole, we don't really have a lack of capacity. What we have is we're just not using our capacity the way that we should be. And that's a political problem, right? Because if we were to say, okay, we're going to redistrict or whatever, we're going to draw lines here and bring kids to different schools so that everything is sort of equal, that's not going to go over well.
No, we tried that.
Right. So, but we're going to run into the same problem if we were to say, okay, we're going to add a middle school here. And then what are we going to do, right? We still have the problem of 3 elementary schools.
Well, I mean, those situations may take care of themselves. I'm not saying that it won't, but if you were to bring 6th grade here, that's roughly 100 students, which you're taking out of the 3 schools, which is about 60 out of Neshby, 30 out of Pittsford, and the rest out of OCA. That's a rough estimate, but it's pretty close. So you're bringing those kids over here, frees up 60 places over there. Of course, and opens up 3 classrooms. Boom, just like that. It may turn into that if we do that down the road, we could end up with 2 elementary schools. But,
I guess the point I'm trying to make is that we could fix our capacity issues today without ever putting a shovel in the ground, and we piss everyone off doing it.
you're the only person on this board when you do that. But yes.
The people voted, that's not what they want.
Right,
so-
it's not what they want. I mean, and we can, and lots of times it comes down to bus rides, comes down to siblings. You don't want one, I had a kid in every single school at one point. It's hard. We did have busing, which was was good, but, long term, we've already essentially closed Whiting and Sudbury, right? I mean, we do use them in different capacities, but those 2 schools have closed. And so, and even though we think of Neshby as a large school, technically, it's still a small school, even with 350 kids in it, or whatever it has in it. So when we say we don't want to close our small schools, well, we're really not we're just consolidating our small schools into bigger schools or whatever. Bigger small schools, yeah, whatever. So, but I'm not saying that we're gonna do that tomorrow, and we're not, 2 years from now. But I think we have to think long-term, because what happens if based on space, that all of a sudden it makes sense to bring 4th and 5th grade here? I'm not saying we would do that, but we have to think long-term. And we know we need another gym here, regardless of whether or not we bring 6th grade or we build all the way out and tell the baseball field that we're gonna move it out back. But we do have to start thinking about that. And I think if we start talking to our community, and I hate this word, be transparent, because no matter how much you talk, you're never transparent if somebody's mad at you. It's important that we educate our communities, and we go out and we talk to them and we explain where we're going. I mean, I didn't want to close Sudbury. That's right across the street from my house, and I moved my kids to Neshabie, when it finally closed.
Well, if they want choice like that, and they want to feel Neshabie so full they can't do anything, well, they don't have much saying about trying to build something that's going to work. The other one's filling the school too full.
But my kids got a lot out of going to Neshabie too. I will tell you that. And when they're in a class of 3 and then they go to a class of 20, completely different. I just want you to know that. Completely different. I would have swore on my mother's grave that I would never have wanted to leave Sudbury. And when I put my kids into Neshabie, it was like a whole new dawning for both of them. And I can see it because my oldest graduated from Neshabie. And I see how much she's a little bit more hesitant, a little bit more not willing to go out and put herself out there because she was in a small school. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing, because for some kids that's necessary and needed. But I do see that. So, bringing this back. So, it sounds like we want a committee. You as a board, or we as a board, need to determine what that charge is, and how many people we want on the committee, and what types of people we want on that committee. And someone has to make the motion. So, I mean, it's not a done deal until motion is done and we figure this out.
I move that we form a committee.
All right, and what's it going to do?
It's going to look at the use of space at the high school.
Including expansion?
Including expansion and the possibility of shifting central office and.
It's gonna look at maybe it's gonna look at all of our facilities and see how we could.
Integrate.
Okay.
More into this building.
Okay.
Consolidate.
And make it work best for students.
And make it work best for students, obviously, yeah.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Any other discussion about that? The only discussion I would like is to how many people you'd like on that committee.
Well, 6 is too few and 10 is too many. What about 8?
Sure.
Or do you want it to be odd?
No, it doesn't matter. It's not a voting committee. You're really just 8 people?
About 4.
Is everybody okay with 8? 8.
That seems reasonable.
Reasonable? 8 people. All right. How many board members? How many lay people? 4 and 4. Who's going to determine who the lay people are? The 4 board members that are on the committee?
No, I think all of them.
Oh.
What did he say?
The four board members are going to be the lay people.
I think we should provide recommendations for people to be.
Do you want, so the whole board should make recommendations of who the other 4 members should be?
Yes.
Okay? All right. So we've determined 4 board members, 4 lay people. Can we add that to the motion, Fernanda?
Sure.
Just so that it's in 8, I knew you would. And you're okay with that? Excellent.
Yes,
All right.
I'm okay with it.
Any other discussion? We'll talk about who's going to be on that committee after we move forward. Okay?
How does this, agenda for the committee differ from what we've had in that report from 2016 or whatever it was?
So the task force didn't really talk about any kind of building expansion. Well, we did. I mean, I guess there was some, but we didn't specifically talk about how to bring in central office or how to do anything. I mean, they're pretty much starting from scratch as far as, I mean, they can jump off of that stuff from 2016 and see what works and what doesn't.
We know we're not looking at a new building.
Right.
So I would like to offer an amendment then, that this committee issue a report no later than
6 months.
6 months? Yeah.
Starting from when?
From when
Well,
it
they
first
probably,
meets.
let's just say you start in January, because I don't see you getting together during the holidays.
In the middle of
Would-
that.
What?
You've got elections for new board members in the middle of that, I'm just gonna say.
I know, but
So,
you know,
might lose-
if you lose a board member, we'll just have to replace them with someone else. Fair enough.
So I guess I'll say, I'll propose a deadline of June 15th for the committee to issue a report then.
Okay. Or by the second meeting of June? How's that
Yeah,
sound?
sure.
All right. You okay?
Fine with me.
Oh, I was waiting for you to say I already got it.
That's a
Okay.
long motion.
Paragraph.
It's a paragraph, but we'll get it all in there. All right, so the motion as I think it is that,
Read it.
actually, I was gonna say it and then you were just gonna tell me if that's what you got.
How if I read it?
All right, fine.
The motion was made by Fernanda and seconded by Barbara to form a committee of 8 members with 4 board members and 4 lay people as determined by the board to look at the use of space at the high school, including expansion with possibility of shifting the central office and integrating more into the building to make it work best for the students, with the committee issuing a report by the second meeting of June 2025.
Well, you are.
It's like we did all that by ourselves. Wow. All right.
Kind of what you said.
I know.
In pieces.
All right.
Can we change lay people to members of the public?
Sure.
Or 4, well, how about 4 non-board members?
4 non-board members.
All right, there we go. All right.
Sound
Okay.
like
All
we're
right.
clergy or
All
something.
right, any other discussion about this? Okay, hearing none.
Well, and it's an advisory committee.
Right, oh yeah, they don't have any, no authority. None. It's just,
I can put
It's
in
an ad hoc.
An advisory committee.
Yeah. Okay. So all of those in favor of that motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Any abstentions? Okay. Thank you for that. All right, so now you need to determine who your board members are gonna be.
Do we nominate or do we just like volunteer or who do we?
Normally we volunteer, but if there's more than 4, then we would have to vote.
I'll volunteer.
Yes. No, not me.
I can nominate.
Oh,
I was saying yes for Kevin. Kevin said yes.
okay. Who else? Oh my goodness. All right, well, I'm adding myself, because that way Kevin and I get to fight. All right, and Leslie? Okay.
I was like the
That's 3, we need 1 more.
I'll do it.
Natalie.
Because they're
Oh.
telling me to.
All right, and Natalie, okay.
I don't know how I'm ever going to fit that in.
Oh, don't worry. What we'll probably do is have the meeting, well, I don't know, we'll figure it out. But I was thinking that we would probably add it before a board meeting. But then again, we might just do it on a different night. We'll have to figure it out when we convene. All right, so any other board members thinking they want to be on this? Because we will vote if there are other ones who are thinking about being on it. Otherwise, if any of us get voted off, because I'm up for reelection this year, and so is Leslie. I don't think you are.
Me?
Yeah, and I don't think Kevin is either.
don't
All
wanna
right,
be.
so if either Leslie or I get voted off, then you might have to have new people in March. So, are you okay with all those people? Everybody say aye. Motion is for Kevin, Lori, Leslie, and Natalie. All those opposed? Abstaining? I did. I made the motion.
Second.
And Barbara seconded it.
Active second.
Sorry. Well, we were all doing it together. All right. Now, potentials for the non-board members. give me some names and we'll reach out to them. You said Tanner Romano.
Tanner, right.
What else?
A senior of some kind?
A senior citizen, you mean? Okay. I might ask Jay Merluzzi because he's been really good.
Yeah.
He was on the last one. He might be helpful going forward. Okay.
They asked Chuck Sharburne as a builder, but he's very lucky.
Yeah, Chuck
He ain't
Sharburne.
got a lot of time, but he'd be great.
All right, I'll ask
Getting
him.
into the school system.
Yes, he's always asking me what's going on in the
Yeah,
school.
he always wants to know.
So-
He's time.
And do we have like a, what are we thinking about?
He's about 10 of himself.
Well, I mean, are you interested? All right, so I'm sorry, I don't know your name. Donna Wilson, thank you. I'm adding you to the list. Okay. Parent, I think we need a parent, other than.
Current parent or a former parent?
I think we need a current parent of little kids, and we don't have little kids anymore.
I do.
But you're a board member, sorry.
Sorry. Well, you could do Mike. I can nominate Mike.
Well, he's also construction too,
Yes,
right?
he's also, yeah.
Oh.
I'm just adding him. I mean, you're gonna need more than just 4 names because
Yeah.
some people are gonna say no.
Yeah.
What about,
Yeah, Sue. would
Stu
do-
Gage?
Yeah,
No,
Sue
Sue
Markowski.
Markowski.
Oh, Sue Markowski.
Yeah.
All right.
Or David, I know that he would really enjoy it.
All right, I'm just gonna put both of them together. Can't both do it. Any other people you can think of? What about a student?
I don't think a student would be helpful, to be frank.
I thought they would be helpful
I
about
think
what they
so.
would want
One line
there.
of your
I think
face
a
is just
student would be
dropping.
helpful.
They might have to come in, hold on. Well, no, it's all
Yeah, I never did.
It's only 6 months. I mean, and it's this school year, so it could be a senior.
Who's that friend that's done you wrong?
I was kind of thinking of Brendan though. I thought he should be on it.
I was thinking like a junior.
Could be a junior. We could ask Michael for potential.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we'll start with this and we'll see if we can get 4 names. And if we get 4 names out of this, then we'll add them to the list. Otherwise, we'll come back for additional names. Fair?
Did we get teacher? I'm sorry. I spaced
Yes,
out.
Miss Wilson.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Yeah.
Is
Yes.
there a young parent of a young person?
Well, that's where
Yeah,
Mike
Michael,
Markowski,
different
or
situation.
Michael.
Mike.
Yeah,
We have like 4 situations.
yeah. And Tanner Romano has little kids
Yes,
too.
he does, yeah.
So, okay, all right, well then, we will start with that list. Okay. Do you want, we don't need to approve that. We'll start with that, and then if you guys come up with other names, send them to me. So we'll have a running list. Okay.
And you're gonna reach out to Allison?
Yeah, so I'm gonna see if she's still doing that kind of stuff. And I'll talk to Renee about her, because I don't think you know Allison Popa.
But do we have to pay her?
Yes.
Let's wait. Shouldn't we wait to pay somebody to do
Well,
that?
she was very reasonable, I have to tell you. And if you want someone to take you through the motions and keep you centered, she's
I
your
think
person.
you're pretty good at it, and I did public participation for 17 years as
Okay.
a consultant.
All right.
I'd rather see how it goes and not pay somebody.
All right, we'll start, but if I find that we're not getting anywhere, we're
Yeah.
we're calling Allison and pull her in. Okay, so, if you're looking at the annual work plan, there are some potential scheduling conflicts. The only one I wanted to mention was that December 10th is held as a board meeting, but I don't think we're gonna need it because we will not have enough information from Brenda from the meeting on the 3rd to not wait until the 17th for our second board meeting. So you can take December 10th off as a board meeting.
But yes, the 17th.
Yes, the 17th, yep.
3rd and the 17th.
Yes. Okay, but the second meeting in January where we do it 3 times, we will keep that one because we usually need that one.
Is it an issue if I scoot out early
No.
with numbers? I mean, it's not.
No, you're fine, you're good, thank you. We're almost done anyway, thank you very much.
When's the third meeting?
FYI, Naomi Millay was the other person. on the
Thank you.
payroll.
I'm adding her to the list too. All right.
She was on the task force before I looked it up. I was.
Thank you.
So there's another meeting on the 14th,
Of December?
January.
January?
Yes, we keep that one.
We have 3 meetings in January.
Yeah, because there'll be lots of discussion, or usually we have lots of lively discussion about what that budget's gonna really look like before we're
And
done.
November, we're done.
Yeah, we're done. This is the last meeting for November. Except unless you're RNESU, we have a meeting tomorrow night. Okay, yes. Yep, okay. Our next board meeting for OVUU is December 3rd here, Tuesday, 6 o'clock. It will be our first meeting of our budget, so you will see an actual budget that night. Again, realize that it's very preliminary, but it'll start us off. And then we do need executive session. Does anybody have anything else they want to bring up before we think about executive session? Anything else that has to be discussed?
We probably should talk about RNESU's actions. I don't know if we can do that tonight or when's the next meeting? Is it?
December 3rd. I think we have plenty of time by December 3rd.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have a quick question.
Sure.
So if there aren't any students at Sudbury, what's going on with that?
Actually, we have, it's being used currently as a sped, or a special ed place for 8 students that have sensory issues that cannot be in the mainstream, and so they are there with the special educator and paraeducators to help them, and they are doing lovely there. I've been there, it's great. So, yeah, so we're using it for that, and to be able to keep them in district instead of having to put them out is super cool. So, yeah. Okay. So, then, not hearing anything else, I would entertain going into executive session at 7:37. Okay. Excellent.